Basic pen strokes for ink drawing. Pen and ink hatching, crosshatching, and scumbling. Drawing the nose with crosshatching. Ways to show value. Hatching, series of parallel lines used for shading. Crosshatching, cross lines used for shading. Hatching. The most basic method of creating value in ink drawing is linear hatching. Fine parallel lines fill an area, so that from just a slight distance, we have the illusion of value. The closer the lines are, the less white paper shows, and the darker the value appears. Heavier line weight, pressing more firmly or using a bigger nib, also gives a darker appearance. Two, shading. One common use of line in drawing is to shade using hatching and/or cross-hatching. Hatch lines are multiple lines that all go more or less in one direction and represent value in an area. The closer together the lines are, the darker the shading. Cross-hatching uses lines that cross on two or more directions. Cross-hatching uses lines that cross on two or more directions. These types of shading are used in ink drawings and some kinds of printing techniques. Cross-hatching. Cross-hatching uses layers of hatching placed at an angle. Usually, the first layer would be vertical, the next horizontal, the next at 45 degrees, and so on. This methodical approach can look a little mechanical, so artists often use variation in direction to add interest. Hatching, cross-hatching, stippling. The last general modeling technique involves things commonly used for prints, and later in 20th century art will be utilized in paintings. Hatching, areas of closely spaced parallel lines. Cross-hatching, second set of lines across the first. Up close it looks strange, but they seem to average out with the light paper into shades of gray. Effect of vision called optical mixing. Stippling, areas of dots to suggest value through their density. More dots crowded in an area, the darker it appears. Example, Homer, husking the corn in New England. Contour hatching. Hatching placed at a slight angle creates a moire-like effect, the diamond-shaped fragments of white paper enlivening the denser areas of value. This technique is often used in figure drawing, with the direction of line helping to suggest the cross contours of the body. Hatching, which follows a contour, can also help to make objects appear more three-dimensional. 1. Create a value scale. 10 steps, start with white and end with black. Should see an even jump in value from one step to the next. You will use this to create a full range of value in your still life. Ways to create value, shading. Inking techniques. Use weighted lines to capture light, shade, and perspective. Weighted, unweighted, additional inking techniques. For transparency, strengthen when outside, then weaken the object as it passes below. Eyelashing. Scumbling and random hatching. Scumbling, often called the Brillo pad technique, uses layers of small calligraphic, scribbled marks to build up value and texture. Varying the direction and shape adds more interest than a simple circular scribble. Random hatching uses layers of short, straight marks. Various textures result depending on whether these short hatches are applied vertically, at right angles, following a contour, or at random angles. Stippling. Stippling uses tiny dots to create value. The closer together the dots, the darker the tone. Larger dots create a denser tonal value more quickly, but can look coarse. What are cross contours? Cross contours are lines which travel, as the name suggests, across the form. They may be horizontal or vertical, as on the right side of the example, or both. Often, in more complex forms, cross contours will be drawn at varying angles. In this rather lumpy example, the grid of cross contours looks a bit like the grid lines on a globe or a diagram of a black hole in space. Cross contours on a complex surface. Often cross contours look like the contour lines on a map of rough terrain. Usually, we don't draw them this mechanically, but use the understanding of cross contours to help us describe the form with more subtle line or shading. They help us understand the three-dimensional form and describe it on a two-dimensional surface. Contours wrap around a form and obey linear perspective. Applying cross contours in line drawing. In this example, the basic contour drawing is developed with some hints of cross contour to suggest the form. The brain needs surprisingly little information to create a three-dimensional image from a simple drawing, using cross contours expressively. Cross contours don't need to be mechanical unless you are drawing a topographic map. You can use your understanding of the cross contour to create expressive marks. This interpretation of the subject using contour and cross contour is more free and expressive, using a relaxed line but still paying attention to the observed form. Using cross contours in hatching and shading. Cross contours are often used when hatching. They may be carried all the way around the form, or used in small sections, curved, or straight, as in this example. The angle of the hatching as it moves around the form changes. Even if you are using shading, and attempting to create a smooth surface, being aware of the flow of cross contours as you draw can help you create a shaded surface that follows and enhances the three-dimensional form, rather than fighting against it. Before the rain. Solitude. The playground. Example. Detail. Hatching generally faster than stippling. Traditional pen works well for weighted hatches. Plan hatches in pencil first. Avoid hooking ends, except to indicate indentations or creases. Follow contours where appropriate. Increase density or use cross-hatching for shadow or darker areas. Avoid 90 degrees intersections, cross-hatch at acute angle. Assignment: draw one object. Object should be large. Show value using cross-hatching only.